The smell hits you first, not the perfumed oils they've desperately splashed across the floor, not the burning incense choking the air from silver censers in every corner, not even the stale sweat of velvet and fear that clings to these stone walls. No, it's rot, sweet, thick, crawling up your nostrils like something alive, the kind of stench that coats the back of your throat that you can taste, putrid flesh liquefying beneath silk and bandages, weeping through layer after layer of linen. They change 3 times a day, but it's never enough. It's never enough. You watch a courtier stumble backward from the doorway, hand clamped over his mouth. His face has gone the color of spoiled meat. Another man, a baron whose name you'll never remember, retches into a corner, his breakfast splattering across tapestries worth more than entire villages. No one moves to help him. No one dares step closer to that door. The younger ones, the new arrivals who've only known Henry as this swollen thing in silk, they press handkerchiefs soaked in lavender water to their faces. It does nothing. The older courtiers, the ones who remember him young and golden and terrifying in a completely different way, they've learned to breathe through their mouths, shallow sips of air, never deep breaths. Never. You hear it then from beyond that door, a low moan that starts human and ends somewhere else entirely. Pain-given voice, the kind of sound that makes your spine try to crawl out of your skin. The guards flanking the entrance stand rigid, eyes fixed on nothing. You wonder how long they've been there, how many hours they've listened to those sounds, whether they'll ever sleep properly again. A physician emerges, moving too fast, and you catch a glimpse as the door swings open. Just a flash, but it's enough. Mountains of cushions and silks, something massive propped among them. Flesh the color of candle wax. And there on the bedside table, bowls of you look away before your mind can process what's in those bowls, what they've been draining from him. The door slams shut. The physician hurries past without acknowledging anyone. His hands shake as he clutches a bundle of soiled bandages. You smell them as he passes. Death and infection and something sweeter, something worse. Behind you, someone whispers. How long? Days? Another voice answers. Maybe hours. The fever. Shut your mouth. A hissed command. You want to lose your head for prophecy. Because that's the law, isn't it? Predicting the death of the king is treason. Has been for centuries. So everyone knows he's dying. Everyone can smell him dying, and not one person can say it out loud. You press yourself against the wall as more physicians arrive. They move with the grim determination of men walking to their own executions. Because what can they do? What miracle can they work now? The body behind that door is a battlefield they lost months ago, maybe years. They are just here to watch, to be present when it happens, so they can testify later that they did everything possible, that it wasn't their fault. Please God, don't let them be blamed. Another moan longer this time, followed by words you can't make out. Except you catch one, just one. Jane. Jane Seymour, dead 11 years. The only wife he seemed to actually mourn. The one buried at Windsor waiting for him because he'd ordered it years ago and he still thought death was something that happened to other people. Footsteps echo down the corridor. Heavy, purposeful men in expensive velvet, moving with the kind of casual authority that says they're about to inherit the earth. The Seymour brothers, Edward and Thomas, here to attend their dying brother-in-law. Sure, that's what they'd say. But you see it in their eyes. The calculation, the plans already made, the coup already in motion, because that the other smell in this palace, underneath the rot and the incense and the fear. Opportunity, the king is dying. The heir is 9 years old, and England, powerful, Protestant, wealthy England, is about to belong to whoever's fastest and smartest and most ruthless. When that door finally opens for the last time, a scream tears through the air. Raw, animal, the kind of sound you didn't know a human throat could make. It goes on, rising and falling until it's not even a scream anymore. Just noise, just the sound of a body that's become nothing but pain, then silence, worse silence. The kind that makes you count heartbeats and wonder if this is it. If it's finally over, then breathing, ragged and wet. But there, not yet. You think about who's behind that door. Really think about it. That's Henry VIII in there. Henry Tudor, the man who told the Pope to go to hell and made it stick, who married 6 women and disposed of them like changing clothes, who destroyed monasteries, enriched nobles, killed thousands, reshaped English religion because he wanted a divorce and wouldn't take no for an answer. The man who was beautiful once, genuinely beautiful, 6 feet 2 inches and athletic and golden-haired and so charismatic that ambassadors wrote home in awe. Who danced for hours, who jousted and hunted and composed music, who was supposed to be England's great Renaissance prince. That's who's rotting alive behind that door. 38 years of absolute power. Anything he wanted, he took. Anyone who opposed him, he removed. The entire country bent to his will or broke, trying to resist. And now he can't even control his own bowels. Can't walk, can barely speak. Can't stop the infection eating him alive from the inside out. This was once the most powerful man in Europe. Now his meat and pus and the smell of death wearing a crown. And you're about to watch him die. Before we step through that door, if you're the kind of person who doesn't look away from history's darkest truths, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Crimson Historians, because we're taking you places the textbooks won't, places they can't. This is just the beginning of Henry's final nightmare, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's go inside. The door opens. You step inside and the heat hits you. The fireplace roaring, logs crackling, the room at 90 degrees, but the thing in the bed is wrapped in furs. Shivering, you force yourself to look at him. The face is bloated beyond recognition. His neck has disappeared into folds of flesh. His eyes are buried so deep in swollen tissue they look like raisins pressed into dough. This can't be the same man, but it is. Go back with me. April 1509. You're in the streets of London watching the new king's coronation. Henry VIII at 17 looks like God's favorite creation. 6 feet 2 inches when most men barely reach 5.5. Shoulders like a ball. A waist you could wrap your hands around. Hair that catches sunlight and turns it. Gold. His wearing cloth of gold, literally gold thread woven into silk, and he gleams like something from mythology. The crowd screams until throats go raw. 3 years later, you watch him at a tournament. His armor is polished steel engraved with Tudor roses fitted perfectly to his 32-in waist, his 44-in chest. He charges. His lance catches his opponent square on the breastplate. The knight goes airborne, crashes, doesn't get up. Henry wheels around, raises his visor, grins. The crowd loses their minds. At the feast afterward, he dances for 6 hours straight. Partners collapse from exhaustion. Henry keeps going. Then he picks up a lute and plays for another hour. Compositions he wrote himself. The Venetian ambassador writes home. He speaks French, English, Latin, and Italian. Plays lute and harpsichord. Sings from sight. Draws the bow with greater strength than any man in England, and jousts marvelously. This is the man who tells the Pope that England will have its own church now, who has Thomas More beheaded for disagreeing, who tears down monasteries stone by stone, who invents charges against in Berlin and has her head cut off, then marries Jane Seymour 11 days later. Absolute power. For 3 decades, what Henry wants becomes law. What he doesn't want ceases to exist. His body seems indestructible until January 24, 1536. Greenwich tilted. Henry's 4004 now competing in a tournament. He charges down the lists. Lance leveled. Something goes wrong. The opposing lance catches wrong. Henry goes airborne. 400 lb of man and armor hitting frozen ground with an impact you feel from 50 feet away. Then his horse comes down on top of him. 1.5 tons of panicked animal. For 2 hours, they think he's dead. He wakes up, but something's broken. The headaches start within weeks. Blinding pain that has him screaming in dark rooms for days. His temper becomes volcanic, unpredictable. He'll be laughing. Then suddenly someone's arrested, executed. The leg wound from the accident doesn't heal. A small ulcer that gets bigger. Starts weeping constantly. They try everything. Picus's cauterization with hot irons. Henry biting down on leather. Nothing works. The wound tunnels deeper. You can see bones sometimes, and the weight gain starts. Not normal middle-ag weight, something pathological. His 32 in waist expands to 42, then 48, then 54. By 1545 his armor shows a 58 in waist, nearly 5 feet around. His face puffs up. His chin disappears into folds. His legs develop more ulcers. Both legs now open wounds that never close. Walking becomes impossible. They build him chairs with pulleys and straps. 6 men to lift him, carry him room to room because the King of England can no longer walk. Modern doctors have theories. Traumatic brain injury from the jousting accident damaging the part of his brain controlling impulse and emotion. Cushing syndrome, a tumor flooding his body with cortisol. Type 2 diabetes definitely. His physicians noted his urine tasted sweet, and sweet urine means wounds that won't heal. Whatever the cause, the effect is undeniable. By his 52nd, Henry VIII is unrecognizable. 400 lb of failing organs and infected tissue, but he's still king, still signing death warrants, still convinced somehow he'll recover, still believing he's the man from the paintings. If you're still watching this, you want the truth, the blood and psychological horror of it. So, why haven't you subscribed? 98% of you haven't clicked that button. If you won't, tell me in the comments what's stopping you. Because we're about to watch this man's final descent. December 1546. You're outside the king's bedchamber at Whitehall, and you can hear him through the door. Not words, just groaning that rises and falls like waves. The physicians go in and out, each time emerging faster, carrying bundles you don't want to examine. One younger doctor tries to explain what is seeing. The left leg, the ulcer has turned black. The tissue is lower your voice, but if we don't tell him what that he's dying. You want to lose your head for prophecy? Because predicting the king's death is treason. They all know he's dying. Not one can say it. Inside, Henry's leg wounds have turned gangrenous. The flesh around the ulcers has gone from red to purple to black. Dead tissue that smells like a battlefield 3 days after the fighting. They are cutting away the rot when they can. When Henry's lucid enough to endure it, slicing off pieces of the King of England like butchers trimming spoiled meat. He screams during these procedures. The sound carries through the palace. The fevers come more frequently. Every few days, sometimes daily. His temperature spikes until he's delirious, thrashing, shouting at people who aren't there. Cromwell, where's that traitor? Cromwell's been dead 6 years. Catherine of Aragon, come here. She's been dead even longer. The fever breaks and is lucid for a few hours, signing documents with a hand that shakes so badly the signatures barely look like letters. The isolation grows thicker than the stench. Who wants to visit? Who wants to watch the king doctor? Ool and moan. Who wants to be alone with him when he dies? His fool stops coming, claims illness. Everyone knows his lying. Nobody blames him. Even Catherine P., his 6th wife, makes a mistake. Early December, they are discussing theology. She disagrees with him on some minor point. He hears heresy. Within hours, there's a warrant for her arrest. She finds out, goes to his chamber that night, falls to her knees, weeps, says she only hoped to learn from his wisdom. Henry pats her head. Is it so, sweetheart? Then we are friends again. The warrant disappears. Even dying, he can still kill you. January 1st, 1547. The new year begins without the King of England. Too weak to attend celebrations. First week of January, he doesn't leave his bedchamber. Can't. He stays in bed in cushions and furs changed constantly because they soak through. His appetite fails. A few bites of bread soaked in wine. Sometimes not even that. Second week, the fevers return worse. So high his skin's hot through the blankets. During the peaks, he's completely gone. Eyes open but seeing nothing. He has conversations with the dead, arguments with ghosts. When the fever breaks, maybe an hour of clarity. He uses it to work. The Duke of Norfolk is in the Tower scheduled for execution January 28th. Norfolk's family begs for mercy. Henry doesn't respond. The old man will die because Henry says so. Third week, he loses the ability to speak clearly. His tongue's too thick. Words come out slurred, garbled. The physicians whisper in corners. How long? Days? Maybe a week. Outside the sick room, Edward Seymour is everywhere taking meetings, building alliances, because when Henry dies, 9-year-old Edward becomes king. Anne. Whoever controls the boy controls England. It's a coup in slow motion happening while Henry's still technically alive. The palace is a snake pit of whispered conversations and midnight meetings, and in the center, in that overheated room, Henry fades in and out. His breathing changes. Shallower, irregular, long pauses that make everyone freeze before it starts again. The attendants work in shifts. 4 hours on, 8 hours off. Nobody can stand more. Outside, London continues, markets open, children play. Inside the palace, everything's waiting. History's greatest tyrant is dying alone in his own filth. If this story grips you, why haven't you subscribed to Crimson Historians? 98% of you haven't. Drop a comment if you won't. Tell me what content you need because we're about to watch a king take his final breaths. January 21st. You watch Henry sign his last document. His hand shakes so violently it takes 3 attempts. The signature that once flowed bold and confident across treaties and death warrants now wobbles like a child's first attempt at writing. Henry R. for Rex for King. Someone supports his arm. The quill scratches across parchment. The ink barely dries before an attendant whisks it away. That trembling signature is the last time Henry VIII writes his own name. January 23rd. He can't rise from bed anymore, not even to his chair. The effort's too much. So the chair sits empty across the room, and sometimes when he's lucid he stares at it. You wonder what he's thinking. If he remembers what it felt like to walk, to dance, to fight, or if he's too busy drowning to remember anything. The death watch begins, though nobody calls it that. Men start appearing at odd hours. Nobles who've been carefully absent suddenly have urgent business nearby. Not in the room. God, no, not that smell, but close. In antechambers, lingering in corridors, positioning themselves for what comes next. Inside, maybe 6 people at any time. Physicians checking pulses with careful fingers, attendants adjusting pillows, a secretary in the corner in case the king manages to speak orders. They rotate constantly. Nobody can stand a full shift anymore. January 25th, they bring in priests. It's expected standard. The king should receive last rites, confess his sins, prepare his soul. Henry refuses. Maybe it's pride, maybe denial. Maybe even now he thinks he'll recover, that the fever will break, that he'll rise from this bed and rule another decade. Or maybe he's terrified because Henry broke from the Catholic Church, declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, spent decades arguing about salvation and sin. And now at the end, what if he was wrong? What if Rome was right and is about to face judgment for schism and heresy in the blood of 2 wives? So he waves the priests away with weak flapping hands and goes on dying. January 26th. His unconscious more than awake now. His breathing's changed. Shallow, irregular, punctuated by long pauses where everyone holds their breath thinking this is it. Before he gasps back, the smell has reached a crescendo. Despite open windows, despite freezing air flooding in, despite burning herbs and perfume and desperate scrubbing, the room reeks of death. His skin's taken on a waxy yellow quality. His lips are cracked and bleeding. His eyes, when they open, don't see anything anymore. They open the windows wider. January cold. Pours in, but it's better than suffocating in the stench. The curtains below. Frost forms on the inside of the glass. Henry shivers under his furs, but nobody closes the windows. Outside in the corridors, courtiers pray. Not for his recovery, for his soul maybe, mostly for this to be over. Inside the antechambers they plot. Seymour and his faction finalizing plans. Other nobles trying to determine which side to back. Nobody sleeps in Whitehall Palace. That night, Archbishop Thomas Cranmer receives a summons in Canterbury. The king wants him, needs him. Cranmer's been Henry's archbishop for 15 years. Helped orchestrate the break from Rome. Granted the divorce from Catherine of Aragon that started everything. He rides through January cold, his horse's breath fogging. He has no idea what he'll find. January 27th evening. Cranmer reaches Whitehall after dark. They lead him through corridors that grow quieter as he approaches the royal chambers, past courtiers who won't meet his eyes, past guards standing rigid to the door. The smell hits him before he crosses the threshold. Inside the room's dim despite the roaring fire. Candles flicker in the draught. The massive bed dominates everything. Cranmer stops. That's not a king. That's barely a man. The face is bloated beyond recognition. The body, you can't tell where it ends. And the bedclothes begin. The breathing sounds wet, labor, like drowning on dry land. Cranmer approaches, kneels beside the bed. "Your Majesty," no response. Henry's eyes are closed, his face slack. Cranmer stays, praying, waiting. Outside, the vultures gather, Seymour and his allies. Other nobles calculating which faction to support. Secretaries preparing announcements they are not allowed to make yet. Nobody sleeps. The hours crawl. 1000 p.m. January 27th. Henry's eyes open for a heartbeat. There's something there, some flicker of awareness. He tries to speak. His lips move. Nothing comes out but a wet rasp. Cranmer leans closer. "Your Majesty." The lips move again, trying to form words. What words? No one will ever know. Confession, regret, defiance, or just confusion. A dying brain firing random signals. The eyes close again. Midnight, January 28, 1547. The new day arrives. Henry VIII is still impossibly alive. But something's changed. You feel it in the room, the quality of the silence. Everyone's movements have slowed, become careful, reverent almost. This is it. Everyone knows. Cranmer speaks softly. "Your Majesty, if you can hear me, are you at peace with God? Do you trust in Christ's mercy?" Henry's hand moves slight, a twitch of fingers, but Cranmer feels it, reaches out, and Henry's fingers close around his. Not strong, not the grip of the man who once crushed opponents in jousts. Just a weak flutter of pressure, but it's there. Cranmer takes it as a sign. He is given a sign, he whispers. He trusts in God's mercy. Maybe it's true. Maybe wishful thinking. Maybe just the dying body's animal response to touch. Those are the last seconds of communication from Henry VII. His fingers relax. 1 a.m. The death rattle starts. If you've never heard it, count yourself lucky. It's the sound of fluid-filled lungs trying to pull air through liquid, a wet, rattling, horrible sound that goes on and on. Cranmer continues praying, his voice steady, mechanical, because what else is there to do? The attendants stand frozen. This is his Tory. This is the moment they'll tell their grandchildren about. The rattle fills the room, competes with the crackle of fire, the whisper of wind through open windows. 1:30 a.m. Someone starts crying quietly. You can't tell who. Maybe someone who remembers the young king, the beautiful prince who once danced all night. 2 a.m. The breathing changes one final time. Slower, longer pauses between each rattling inhale. Cranmer's prayer becomes rhythm. Our Father who art in heaven, pause. Hallowed be thy name, pause, thy kingdom come. The pauses grow longer. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Everyone stop pretending to do anything else. They're watching the bed, watching for movement. 20 seconds. Still nothing. 25. Cranmer stops praying mid-sentence. 30 seconds of silence. One physician steps forward, places careful fingers against Henry's neck, searching for pulse. Waits, checks again, looks up at the others, nods once. King Henry VIII is dead. No dramatic final words, no lightning or earthquake or cosmic significance, just a body stopping. The absence of breath where breath used to be. Approximately 2 a.m., January 28, 1547. 55 years old. The room stays frozen for what feels like hours but is probably seconds. Then someone whispers, "The king is dead," and everything that comes after begins. But right now, in this moment, there's just a corpse. 400 lb of meat cooling in silk sheets, and the overwhelming, inescapable smell of rot. You've watched a king die. You've spent these minutes with us in that death chamber, smelled what they smelled, saw what they saw. If you felt something, disgust, fascination, maybe even pity for the monster, hit that subscribe button to Crimson Hister. Ian's right now. And if you didn't, I need to know what would make you subscribe. Comment below because we're not done. There's still the aftermath, the final horror of what happens when a tyrant's body betrays him even in death. The body lies in state for hours. No one touches it. Think about that. The King of England, dead in his bed, and no one moves him. No one closes his eyes, or straightens his limbs, or does any of the immediate death rituals you'd expect because no one wants to be the first to touch a dead king. What if someone accuses you of murder later? What if his death becomes a political weapon, and you were alone with the body, so they leave him? While Edward Seymour immediately within minutes takes control, sending messages, gathering allies, essentially staging a coup in the hours before anyone publicly knows the king is dead. The announcement doesn't come until 10 a.m. 8 hours after death. 8 hours of frantic political maneuvering while Henry's corpse cools in those silk sheets. By the time they announce it, Seymour's already won. He has secured the boy. King Edward locked down the council, positioned his men in every key role. The transition's over before most people even know there was a transition. But now they have a problem. The body, 400 lb, is difficult enough to move. But 400 lb of decomposing flesh, bloated with fluid, riddled with infection that's been festering for years. The embalmers arrive and stare at what they are supposed to prepare for burial. Where do you even start? They work for hours draining fluids, packing cavities with spices and herbs, anything to slow the rot to mask the smell that's only getting worse now that is dead. The coffin they prepare is massive. Lead-lined has to be. They coat the interior with more spices, more herbs, layers of wax-soaked cloth, because dead doesn't mean the rot stops. If anything, it accelerates. The journey to Windsor takes days. Slow procession, careful. The coffin transported with extreme caution because everyone's terrified of what might happen if it breaks open. They stop overnight at Sion Abbey. And here's where history gets strange. There's a story, maybe legend, maybe truth, that the coffin leaked or burst, that by morning fluids had seeped onto the floor, that dogs were found licking at the remains. Historians still fight about whether it's true. Might be propaganda from Henry's enemies, divine judgment on a tyrant, God's final word on a man who broke his church. But the fact that people believed it, the fact that the story spread and stuck, that tells you everything about how Henry was viewed at the end, not as a glorious king, as a monster whose body was so corrupted even death couldn't contain it. He's buried at Windsor Castle, St. George's Chapel in the vault with Jane Seymour, the third wife, the one who gave him Edward, the one who died doing it. No grand tomb ever gets built. Henry planned one, commissioned it, was going to be the most spectacular monument in England. Never happened. His daughter Elizabeth, when she finally takes the throne, doesn't finish it. So Henry VIII, the king who wanted monuments, who wanted eternal glory, who rewrote England's religion to serve his ego, gets a simple floor slab, marble inscription. Nothing spectacular. You can visit it today. Tourists walk over it without noticing. Let's count the cost. 2 wives beheaded, and Lynn and Catherine Howard, both on adultery charges that were likely fabricated. Both killed because Henry wanted them gone. 2 wives divorced. Catherine of Aragon and of Cleves. Catherine died broken and exiled and survived by being smart enough to give Henry what he wanted. 1 wife died in childbirth. Jane Seymour, giving him his precious son. 1 wife survived, Catherine P., who outlived him by 18 months. But the wives are just the famous names. 70,000 executions, maybe more. It's hard to count because record-keeping wasn't perfect, and mass executions during rebellions numbered in the thousands. Thomas Cromwell, his most capable minister, the man who made the break from Rome work, beheaded. Thomas More, scholar and saint, Henry's friend, beheaded for refusing to accept Henry as head of the church. John Fisher, cardinal and bishop, beheaded. The list goes on and on. Nobles, commoners, priests, scholars, anyone who crossed him, anyone who became inconvenient. And what did it buy? He changed England forever. The Church of England still exists. The break from Rome fundamentally altered English identity, politics, religion. That's real. That's permanent. But his children, Edward V, VI, the precious heir, died at 15, sickly his whole life. Tuberculosis probably never the strong king Henry dreamed of. Mary I from the Spanish marriage became queen, and tried to turn England Catholic again. Earned the nickname Bloody Mary for burning Protestants. Died childless and hated after 5 years. Elizabeth I from in Berlin, the daughter he barely acknowledged, finally stabilized things. Became one of England's greatest monarchs. Reigned 45 years and died beloved. The irony, the daughter Rom, the marriage that started everything, the marriage that broke England from Rome. She was the successful one. What killed him? Modern doctors still debate it. The jousting accident in 1536 probably caused traumatic brain injury, damage to the frontal lobe, explaining the personality change, the sudden rages, the lack of impulse control. Cushing's syndrome fits a pituitary tumor flooding his body with cortisol, explains the rapid weight gain, the moon face, the wounds that wouldn't heal, the mood swings, type 2 diabetes almost certainly. His physicians noted the sweet-tasting urine. That means blood sugar through the roof, infections that never resolve, tissue breaking down. The leg ulcers suggest chronic venous insufficiency, poor circulation. Blood pooling in his legs causing tissue death. Some historians argue for syphilis, though the evidence is debatable. Probably it was all of it. Multiple conditions compounding, each making the others worse. His body a cascade of failures, each one triggering the next until the whole system collapsed. But here's what's certain. He died alone, feared, not loved, powerful until the end. But power didn't save him. Didn't make the pain less. Didn't make people want to be near him. Didn't give him peace or comfort or anything resembling dignity. Absolute power for 38 years, and it bought him a death in his own filth, surrounded by people waiting for him to stop breathing, so they could start fighting over the scraps. That's the price of tyranny, and we're still obsessed with him 478 years later, still writing books, making documentaries, analyzing what went wrong. Because Henry VIII is a warning written in flesh and blood and rot, about what happens when one person has too much power for too long, about what happens when nobody can say no, about what happens when you can kill anyone who disagrees, and eventually you're surrounded by people who tell you only what you want to hear about what happens when your body becomes as corrupt as your power. He wanted to be remembered forever, wanted monuments and glory and his name in every history book. He got his wish, just not the way he imagined. We remember him, but not as the Golden Prince or the Renaissance King. We remember the monster, the tyrant, the man who rotted alive. We remember the smell. We've just spent 16 minutes in the company of a monster and a man, watching him fall from Golden Prince to rotting corpse. Crimson Historians brings you these blood-soaked truths every week. The real history, not the sanitized textbook version, the parts that smell and hurt and make you uncomfortable. We're building a community of real history lovers who want the truth, no matter how dark. Join us by hitting that subscribe button. Or tell me in the comments why you won't. What's holding you back? Because next week, we're going somewhere even darker. Absolute power, absolute corruption, absolute loneliness. That's the equation Henry VIII proved in flesh and bone and rotting tissue. He had everything a human being could want, wealth beyond measure, authority that was literally divine according to the laws he wrote, the ability to reshape a country, a religion, the course of history itself. And it bought him nothing where it mattered. It didn't make the pain less, didn't make people love him, didn't give him a peaceful death or even a dignified one. He died badly. As as any peasant in a ditch. Worse, maybe because he had 38 years to see it coming and couldn't stop it. That's Henry's final lesson, the one they don't teach in school. Even kings die badly. Especially kings, maybe. Because when you've had that much power for that long, when you've removed everyone who tell you uncomfortable truths, when you're surrounded only by people terrified of you or using you, there's nobody left when you actually need them. Nobody to hold your hand because they care, just people holding your hand because they're required to, counting the minutes until you stop breathing. There's humanity in this horror, though. That's what makes it so compelling. 4 centuries later, Henry wasn't born a monster. You saw what he was: beautiful, talented, charismatic, the kind of prince people write songs about. Something broke him. Maybe the jousting accident. Maybe the accumulation of power with no checks. Maybe just the slow corruption that comes from getting everything you want for decades until you forget other people are real. But underneath the tyrant, underneath the rot, there was still a man calling for his dead wife in fever dreams, scared enough of judgment to refuse last rites, human enough to feel pain even if he'd stopped feeling empathy. That's what makes it tragic instead of just grotesque. He could have been different. Could have been the king they thought he'd be at 18. Could have used that intelligence and charisma and power for something other than ego and paranoia and body counts. But he didn't. And this is what history really looked like. This is what it really smelled like. Not the clean paintings in museums, not the dramatic movies with beautiful actors dying beautifully. This pain and puss and terror and the wet sound of a man drowning in his own fluids while people plot in the next room. This is the truth history classes skip over, the parts that make you uncomfortable, the parts that smell. And if you want more of it, if you want to know what really happened when Robbie's jaw was blown off before his execution, when they had to hold the shattered bone in place just to get his head on the guillotine, we're covering that next week. The architects of terror always end badly. Always. And we're going to watch every second of it. You made it to the end. 17 minutes in a death chamber with crimson historians. That means something. It means you're not squeamish, not looking for comfortable history. You want the real thing. The blood and horror and psychological darkness that shaped our world. If you enjoyed this descent into the parts of history they don't show you, subscribe right now. Hit that button. We do this every week. Different deaths, different tyrants, same commitment to showing you what really happened, no matter how dark it gets. And if you didn't subscribe, I actually want to hear your reason in the comments. Seriously, is it the content, the delivery, the length, the darkness? Tell me, because we're here for you. For the real history seekers who aren't afraid of blood and puss and truth, who understand that sanitized history is a lie and the real story is always darker and stranger and more human than what they taught in school. I'll see you in the next one if you dare.